Hey, college wrestling fans, this is John Thompson, number one. And today I want to dedicate this particular episode of JT1Wrestle to a very special man that was very influential in a positive and impactful way in the lives of many people in our small pocket of southeastern Iowa. He was one of my PB wrestling coaches as a kid from first grade through eighth grade. His name is Paul Graham, and I've been thinking a lot about this. I mean, where in the world do you even start when you start talking about Paul Graham and the impact that he had, the legacy that he left? He was a trailblazer in a lot of ways, and I suppose probably start back at the very beginning. So, in my little hometown of Sigourney, Iowa, wrestling was brought to the high school in 1963 by legendary Coach Jack Smith. And as a wrestling historian and as a wrestling aficionado, you realize that when a wrestling team begins, it doesn't really get put on the map. And people really don't know about it and think to themselves, this is a wrestling school until you have your first superstar. Now, Sigourney had some good wrestlers between 1960 3 and 1966. Some state qualifiers, I think they had a state place winner, but it wasn't until Paul Graham arrived on the scene that Sigourney got its first major star. Uh, Paul qualified for state as a sophomore, and then he became our high school's first ever high school state champion in 1967 as a junior. Turned around and won another state title in 1968 as a senior, becoming a two-time state champion. And that's really when Sigourney Wrestling, really started its dynasty. Sigourney from about that time until about, the late 80s, about 1988, Sigourney won sectional titles, conference titles, district titles. Never did win the state title as a team, but we came really close, with some seconds and thirds amongst the years. And when you think about all of the great wrestlers that have came through Sigourney, it started with Paul Graham. Paul Graham was the trailblazer. He was the one that cleared the trees out of the forest and laid down the cement and paved the way for all the other greats that would come after him. And then after his high school career was over, he went to Muscatine Community College, which I think back in those days was called Eastern Iowa Community College. I know it had a different name back then. They only had wrestling for a very short amount of time. A very small window of when the school fielded a wrestling program, and his sophomore year, his second year at Muscatine Community College, he became an NJCAA All-American, taking third place. So very decorated high school career, very decorated collegiate career, making NJCAA All-American honors. And that's what he did as a wrestler. And then exactly when he started, I'm not positive. I know that he coached at the collegiate level for a while at William Penn University. Um, but his main staple, but what everybody remembers him as, is a youth as a pee-wee wrestling coach. And he began that many years ago. And if I were to sit here and tell you all of the wrestlers that started under Paul, learned under Paul, were taught under Paul, that went on to have phenomenal success in high school. We're talking uh, four-time state champion TJ Siebel. We're talking uh, three-time state champion Derek Moyer, two-time state champion Dominic Moyer, who went on to wrestle at the University of Nebraska, becoming a three-time NCAA Division I qualifier and a Cliff Key Las Vegas Invitational finalist. Jake Kerr, who was sixth, third in the state tournament, went on to wrestle for the University of Iowa and was a national qualifier and fifth in the Midlands Championships. I could just give you credential after credential after credential of so many guys that achieved so much, who began their wrestling careers. So they started with Paul Graham and learned from Paul Graham. His own family, his son Matt, four-time state qualifier, son Brandon, state finalist, and went on to be a three-time NAIA national qualifier for William Penn. His son Brady, taken fourth and third in the state. His nephews, John Graham, who, in my opinion, is the best wrestler, or at least one of them anyway, that never did make state, but still a phenomenal career, 100 career wins, and his nephew Adam, who was a two-time state qualifier for Sigourney, and then went on to be a national qualifier for Waldorf College. Can you see what I'm saying? And I've only named maybe 1/8 of the wrestlers that learned under Paul Graham. And it wasn't just what he taught you as a wrestler, but the men that we all became. Most of us became very good, successful people in life in a variety of ways, and a lot of that was from what Paul taught us in the practice room. Um, for me personally, I can speak to myself here because um, Paul had a really big effect on me, and I learned so much under him. What's funny is when I first started wrestling, my first year of wrestling, I went 1-13, and my dad was like, found out that I really wanted to be a part of this. I really wanted to do it. It's something that I fell in love with right off the bat. And the next year, he found out about Paul Graham's Team Oski. And so we started driving up from Sigourney to Oskaloosa, the 25 miles or whatever it is, started driving up there to practices. And um, I tell you, I was hopeless, but Paul's one of those people. He doesn't care how bad you start out. Like he knows he can make something out of you. No, give him a challenge. Give him a huge challenge of someone that probably has no business being on the mat whatsoever, and he'll somehow make a wrestler out of you. He he had such a difficult time getting me to put any aggression, any anger, any, be mean out there on the mat. He always said to me all the time, I can still remember him, like this was just like the thing he always said to me, Steve, you're too nice of a guy. Steve, you're just too nice of a guy. He was always saying that to me. And I remember once when I was little, we had a practice, and it was right after a tournament, and another guy on our team had kind of thrown a fit, kind of made a scene after a loss. And Coach Graham made it very clear to us. He said, "Now look, the one thing we're going to do, win or lose, is we're always going to shake our opponent's hand." And then he grabbed me and he goes, "Now, guys, you don't have to go as far as Steve does. You don't have to give him a hug and a kiss and offer to buy him dinner after the match." So he really liked giving me crap about that. And how he finally got me to finally start, showing some aggression, try to win the match, and you gotta have that. You gotta have that mental edge. How he finally got me to do that is he developed this system of what he would say to me is he'd say, "Okay, Steve, uh, before the match starts, before you hear that first whistle, you can be friends with your opponent. Your opponent can be your friend. And then after that last whistle, after the match is over and you hear the last whistle, then your opponent can be your friend again. But in between those two whistle blows, your opponent is your enemy, and it's your job to destroy him." And it took him a long time to get that through my head, but he finally did. And there was a tournament, in, in particularly I remember, and I'm not going to use the name here because I don't want to offend anybody, but using somebody's name when they wouldn't want me to. But there was a kid that I had to wrestle, and I had wrestled this kid, oh, I don't know, probably half a dozen times or so, and he had always just kicked the ever letting ever loving crud out of me. Every single time we wrestled, he pinned me or beat me like 15-0 or whatever. And at this tournament, it was at Tri-County High School, so this tournament took place. We had a two-man bracket. It was me and him. It was best of three matches. And Coach Graham told me, he said, Steve, I know you can beat this kid. There's no reason that this kid should beat you. You've been doing your push-ups every day like I've been telling you to do. You've been working hard in the room. You've been learning the moves. You've been, really putting in the work. He said, there's no reason you can't compete with this kid. And so I went out onto the mat, and this time I wrestled the kid really close. This time I gave him a good match. He was ahead 3-2. I took a half-ass shot on him, just to make it look like I was trying, even though I was scared. I kind of, like when you take one of those shots and you're afraid of going full force because you're afraid he's going to whip you over, he's going to throw you in the headlock or something. You just kind of take it half-assed, that way you don't get caught in the throat or something. And then he spun around me and won 5-2. Now, I was thinking at the time, I'm gonna walk off the mat that Coach Graham is gonna be happy with me, right? This is the same kid that like pinned me, beat me 1,000,000 points to 0. This time I kept it fairly close, 5-2. But when I walked off the mat thinking, Coach Graham's gonna be happy with me, he wasn't happy at all. He said, Steve, he goes, I could tell you were scared of the kid. You were hesitant. You were wrestling conservatively. He said, no, we're not doing that. And then he took me, we walked down the hallway, and he said, he really got inside my head. That's one of the things I think that made Coach Graham such a great coach. He could get in up here. He did such a good job of that. And I can give you more stories of him doing that too. And he just made it clear to me, we're going to go out there. We're going to show no fear. We're going to go after him the whole entire time. It doesn't matter what happens, but you are going to go after him like you can beat him, and you're going to score until you can't score anymore. And so the next match, he had me so mentally prepared that I went out and beat that kid 12-2. I mean, I just scoring points after points, takedown after takedown, having my way with him. And then our third and final match, he was like, you can beat him better than you beat him the last time. And the next match, I went out there and I stuck him in like 42 seconds. And that was a turning point for me, all because Coach Graham took the time to get inside my head. And then I started doing really well. I started beating, kids that were really good. There was a kid from Colfax Bingo that year. He hadn't been beat by anybody. Was undefeated. And I had to wrestle him at a tournament. And of course, I allowed myself to get psyched out. So that tournament we wrestled at was in Newton, Iowa. And I had to wrestle him at Newton. And I think he beat me like 8-1 or 8-2 or something like that. And there's another time Coach Graham got in my head, and I saw him the next weekend at another tournament. And Coach Graham was like, there's no reason you can't beat that kid. Steve, you can be one of the best kids in Iowa if you want to be. You just got to believe in yourself and you got to work hard. And I wrestled that kid again, and that kid ended up being a huge rival with me. And I beat him the next time. Coach Graham again getting in my head. I won the next time. We wrestled 7-2. And that kid ended up taking second at the AAU championships that year. And other than his loss in the finals, that 7-2 loss to me was his only loss that season. So he only lost twice that season. And one of those losses was to me. And I ended up taking third at the same AAU tournament. Now, placing at the AAUs was the highlight of my youth. It was, I can't think of a moment when I was a kid that meant more to me. And what really made it mean a lot to me was I we had been a part of Team Oski for a while, and I was watching these kids, like I was watching like Dominic Moyer and Brandon Graham and Bobby Sennett. They were going in there and they were coming back home, and they were either winning the whole tournament or placing really high. And I never thought in a million years the idea of me like ever placing third. Hell, I never even knew if I'd ever even win a match there. And anyway, I ended up taking third, but I had made it to the quarterfinals, and there was a kid that I haven't seen or heard from him in years. His name was Jeff Tucker, and Jeff kind of had his way with me in the quarterfinals. Threw me to my back like two or three times, and ended up sticking me right towards the end. And then I made my way back up to the consolations, and I made my way to the consolation finals, where once again I had to wrestle Jeff Tucker. And again, I keep on going back to this, but Coach Graham getting inside of my head. He Before that match happened, he took me aside, and we went over it again and again and again. We had this strategy, right? He said, stick to the game plan. So we kind of knew the kind of moves Jeff did and the kind of moves that he executed. So Coach Graham had me go over. It's almost kind of funny to think about, but Coach Graham had me go over this crossface into a cradle, crossface cradle, and we must have gone over that. Oh my God, all morning, went over it again and again and again and again and again. And he told me, he said, when you go out there, he says, stay focused, stick to the game plan. And he says, don't worry about getting tired, don't worry about the score, don't worry about anything other than sticking to the game plan that I have given you. And I went out there and avenged my quarterfinal loss. I beat Jeff Tucker 6-0 in the third place match. And what made that moment so special was not only winning then, but we won the AAU championship that year as a team. Oskaloosa was the champions, Team Oski. And when people talk to Coach Graham about that, you know, he always said that Steve coming back and taking third was huge. Oh yeah, Steve coming back and getting third place, that was huge points for us. And he really made me feel like I was a big part of that, and that I had a lot to do with why we won that team title that year. And he was like that. Another thing I'll say about Paul real quick. And he he always, like, of course he loved having the super, awesome, guys who were, extremely successful, extremely talented. He loved having the Mikey Fosters. He loved having the Don Moyers and the Derek Moyers. He loved those guys. But he always seemed to really, really get a twinkle in his eye when he talked about the kids that people doubted, the ones that people thought, might not, amount to anything. Um, had, I think he's going to be okay with me saying this, but another guy that started off not so hot and not so great was a kid named Gene Newhart. And I remember, people were kind of like, boy, are you ever going to make a wrestler out of this kid or not? And at the AAUs, one of the years we went up there, good old, as Paul always called him, Mean Gene. Good old Mean Gene made the semifinals. And I can remember Paul being so happy about that. He was so excited. Oh, Mean Gene made the semifinals. Mean Gene made the semifinals. And he was so happy and excited about that. So those are the kind of memories I have about Paul. Just gotta tell you, I have cried more this weekend uh, than I have probably in the last 5 years. I just, I could give you so many more stories about Paul Graham, the kind of person that he was. I mean, and then look at the web that he created. I mean, so many of these guys now they're coaching, now they're doing stuff like take Marcus Hollingshead. I think I don't remember exactly when Paul stopped coaching, but Marcus was a state finalist his senior year. His younger brother, Brett Sams, was a state place winner a couple of times. Then they had another younger brother named Drew Sams, who I think wrestled under Paul. And now he was an All-American at Graceland University. I think he was the first ever NAIA All-American for Graceland. And now he's the head coach at William Penn, doing a great job there. And I can name you dozens and dozens and dozens of other people that Paul had such a positive impact on, and that went on, like I said, state place winners, state champions, the national qualifiers at the collegiate level, so on and so forth. Paul left such a positive impact and such a huge legacy on Sigourney, on Oskaloosa, um, on our pocket of Southeast Iowa. You know, I can't say enough good about the man. Um, I think back at a 7-year old pudgy little boy that got picked on and bullied a lot at school. And I think to myself, what if I had never gotten involved in this sport? What if I had never had men in my life like Paul Grant? That who would I be today? How would I have turned out? Um, you know, I often wonder that all the time. Um, I'm very fortunate, and there's probably 300 people, 500 people that would say that, whether they're the wrestler themselves, or they're the mom, or they're the dad, or the aunt, or the uncle, whatever, the grandpa, the grandma, whatever it happens to be. Our lives are all better, and we all became better people because Paul Graham was a part of our lives. So we lost a incredible human being this past weekend, and I talk like Brandon said, his son Brandon, Steven Stonebreaker never knows when to shut up. And that's true, I don't. Because I could sit here and I could just keep singing the praises of Paul Graham all day long. I really could. He had such a positive influence on me. I know I've said that now a million times, but what a great man. And we lost a good one. Lost a very, 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 very good one. Rest in peace, coach. Rest in peace.